a Navy-type game, maybe off the schedule, but come on, let's be real. It had to live on in spirit, right? Very much a Navy triple option, fast-paced game style for Notre Dame this past weekend, beating Louisville 12-7. 14 total possessions, 7 for each team. Notre Dame scored 7 touchdowns 2 games ago against South Florida. So definitely not the game script that Lou, either you or I predicted. And we thought this would be somewhat of a shootout. I believe I had the over. I can't remember if you did or not. But anyway, Notre Dame wins 12-7 against Louisville, moves to 4-0, scores the fewest number of points in a win since 1990. Lou, why don't you tell us who that 1990 game was against and if it was anything unlike this Notre Dame basically navying Louisville to sleep that we just saw?
Yeah, it was 10-6 against USC in the season finale at the Los Angeles Coliseum. Notre Dame had just lost at home, the number 1 ranking, with a loss to Penn State. And now think about it. They won that game 10-6 with the number 2 overall pick in the future at quarterback, Rick Meyer, Ricky Waters, Rocket Ishmael. Jerome Bettis was a freshman on that team. Virtually everyone on the offensive line went to the NFL. Derek Brown was a first-round tight end. So, yeah, I imagine the message boards, if they had existed back then, would have been pretty intense, too, about how the heck do they score 10 points. And then they scored only 9 against number 1 Colorado in the Orange Bowl in a 10-9 loss. So, it's not just now that criticism sometimes occurs with offensive production.
Yeah, I mean, just imagine like any team that had that kind of loaded offense with all these draft picks scoring 10 points against anybody. I mean, people would be jumping from buildings and putting banners up of, fire the coordinator or whatever, like just complete lunacy. But yeah.
I have a box full of letters here in my office from that era, Patrick. I keep it for posterity. They were kind of the substitute for the message board posts.
So did you take a look back through them after?
It's always amusing to look back and say, this Holtz has got to go. He's the worst around, and now you get it. Gosh, I long for the days of Lou Holtz.
Some things never change, and within at least Notre Dame circles, it's death taxes and consternation after one loss or one win that felt like a loss because something was disappointing. But at any rate, I don't think that you come off of this game thinking, yippee, everything's all great. Bring on Clemson, let's go. I mean, obviously, it didn't help that Clemson scored 10 touchdowns against Georgia Tech. But anyway, Lou, your concern level or lack thereof, where is it at? Did this move the needle for you in a wrong way or not move it at all when you look about the game that's coming up now in less than 3 weeks? It's not this big thing in the distance so much anymore.
Yeah, several times in the 3-2-1 column or elsewhere, I said that either against Florida State, Louisville, or Pittsburgh. And I didn't include Georgia Tech, but there was going to be one game before Clemson, and I thought it would be among either Florida State, Louisville, or Pittsburgh, where it would be what I classified as a white-knuckler, one that you have trepidation about. It's like, oh, you can't play that way against Clemson, and, what are they expecting? And, it looks dismal here and there, and that happens every year. There's going to be one game at least on the schedule every season where something like this is going to happen. Now, the problem is it happens with virtually everyone except Alabama and Clemson make it look so easy. They're always going to be the constant boogeyman and the constant comparison. But teams are going to go through this, and Notre Dame experienced it, and what now I anticipate is because they had that game against Louisville, I think they will play very, very well at Pittsburgh, because that was the game that I looked at in the preseason and said, boy, there's a great history there with Pittsburgh. It's the first road trip. Well, it wasn't at the time because they were supposed to be at Wake Forest on September 26th. But, it's just that's the team that always seems to give Notre Dame problems. But I'm expecting a very good performance this week from Notre Dame because of what happened this past Saturday.
So you're absolutely right in that every year one of these things finds its way onto the schedule, probably when you didn't expect it. I mean, this game didn't even get a third of the way to the over. But I think it's worth something that no matter all of the criticisms and worries and fair ones, I think, that came out of this game, that somehow, and when you look back at really the last 4 seasons now with one of these things, Notre Dame has played at much less than its best or what we think its best is, or just hasn't played very well. I'm not sure we quite know what to make of this team, this offense, whatever. I think the key question, and this is what I wrote about a little bit in my column on Saturday after the game, is you kind of have to hope that the offense is a work in progress and not necessarily a finished product. But anyway, it's a good sign that you can play your B- game, C game, or in this case, passing game that I would probably give barely a passing grade to, if we'll call a C- the worst passing grade you can get, and still win. And granted, I think this was the first game all year where you thought like, oh yeah, they might lose. Like that, the moment before that onside kick was overturned, I thought like, oh, they're going to be up against it. There's some real pressure on the defense now. But yeah, at least it's something to be said for finding a way, no matter whatever it might be, to win these kinds of games. So if nothing else, and before we really dive into more what happened here, I think that's at least important to acknowledge, because we've seen a lot of other teams, both Notre Dame in previous iterations and around the country, where that's not always the case.
Yeah, we're seeing upsets every Saturday. I mean, you look at North Carolina, they were ranked number 5 in the country, and Notre Dame had just handed Florida State a 16-point defeat. And they go into they beat North Carolina, but they even have a 31-7 lead at one point. Sometimes things just get out of hand. And in the same way, the reason I expect Notre Dame to be sharp against Pittsburgh is the same reason I anticipated that they would be better on defense against Louisville, because they did not have a good defensive game against Florida State. So, okay, that's seldom in these last 3-4 years has Notre Dame had back-to-back poor performances. And even if it's just one side of the ball, then that next week you can almost count on that side of the ball being much better. And that's what I'm anticipating that the offense will be able to do against Pittsburgh.
I have a few just lingering questions on uncertainty, really, what this offense is, to, I guess, confidently go in and be like, yep, they'll be good. But at the same time, Notre Dame just had its 3rd straight game, right, with 200-plus rushing yards. And it's like, all right, well, it's hardly being a thing that anybody's acknowledging. I don't know the last time that happened for them, Lou. If you do, educate the people here.
Oh, gosh. I mean, the 2017 team with Mike McGlinchey and Quentin Nelson and Sam Mustapher, Alex Bars, they averaged 269.5 yards rushing.
Okay, so more recent than I thought.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, is many times it's easy to forget that that was the point of emphasis. And, the odd thing, Patrick, about that season is they started off 3-0, but it was like a very, blah 3-0, especially after beating Vanderbilt 22-17. They replaced the starting quarterback, Brandon Wimbush, with Ian Book to try to take it to the higher level. And I think there was a criticism in that Vanderbilt game that maybe they were trying to make Wimbush into something he is not as far as a passing quarterback. His strength was as an athlete and runner who could hit the deep ball off play action or lull you to sleep that way. And actually, that was 2018. Excuse me. That was the following year. But what I'm saying is the point is the same. Is that against Louisville, it was Notre Dame came in with a tremendous ground game, but early on tried to establish the wide receivers and the passing game, trying to be something which they aren't necessarily. And that's where they have to make this decision as far as, do you continue to try to press forward and improve in that area of the game to balance out your strong running attack, or do you really just try to lean on that running attack as your bread and butter and as your identity moving forward? It's sort of that's where maybe there is a similarity to 2018.
So I liked the actual emphasis to come out and try to throw the ball. And in the first drive was 8 designed passes, 4 runs, even split with 11 personnel and multi-tight ends. I thought this was actually a good game to do it, and I thought you kind of had to at some point. Like like eventually you're gonna want to throw the ball, want to have some semblance of being able to chuck it downfield if you're playing from behind. I mean, what we've seen Notre Dame do is impressive, but definitely lends itself to I guess what you call a positive game script, playing from ahead. And what's going to happen when, all right, you're facing 14-0 after 2 drives, or you're tied at the half and you give up touchdown, field goal or something, and you got to come down from 10 in the second half or whatever. This was definitely the game to do it, because Louisville was one of the worst pass defenses in the country. I mean, this allowing over 8 yards per attempt coming in, that's really bad. I think they'd given up 11. I can't remember exactly. It was a lot, though. I think 11 plays of at least 30-plus yards through the air. So everything here kind of set itself up pretty well for being a time to experiment, time to get something going. Of course, you had Kevin Austin back now. You had Javon McKinley, who came off a really good game. Let's see what he can do. And ultimately, you came out of that with a lot more questions and concerns than answers, I thought.
Yeah, and one of the things we had discussed all year is, okay, in September, they established their identity, their base with the ground attack. This is who we're going to be. This is going to be our bread and butter. And I viewed October as the time to work more on the passing game, because, okay, your running game is established. Now, for your big push in November, where the schedule and the stakes go up a little bit, you get Clemson, you get Boston College, you get North Carolina, a very prolific scoring team as well. That's the time to, you can't just win necessarily with just one element. It's like you have to be able to not necessarily be excellent in both, but excellent continuing with the running game, and then balance it with the auxiliary passing game enough to where opponents have to honor it. And right now at that point, they didn't reach that stage, and Brian Kelly is the first to acknowledge it. And that's something that they need to continue to work on moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, he straight up told us today, like, he looks at balance as being able to be equally effective in throwing the ball and running the ball, even if it's not like, all right, 50-50 run pass split. Right now, it's not really close.
Yeah. You can be better balanced. Let's say you throw for 170 yards and run for 170. That's not necessarily balanced, because you're not effective in either way. If you can run for 300 yards and pass for 150 on, let's say, like just 8 of 12 or whatever, any coach will, I think, sign up for that, because you're controlling the line of scrimmage, but also able to effectively hurt the opposition with the pass. You see a triple option team sometimes. They're not going to have great passing numbers, but boy, if they can hit like on 4 or 5 long plays, they're doing exactly what they want to do on offense.
So I think the big thing that you see with the passing game discord and just lack of explosiveness is the receivers have been, revolving door. Braden Lindsey tried to give it a go. He's hurt again. Bennett Skowronek finally out there. Kevin Austin finally not really limited. And I liked how Notre Dame tried to move him around, put him in the slot sometimes, put him on the field side. But right now, it's still a problem that you're kind of running out of time to really sort out. And I don't think this gave you much of an indication that the Javon McKinley we saw against Florida State is something you'll expect consistently. I mean, he had one catch for 7 yards. It was a big catch in the final drive, but I think he had 4 other targets if you include the 2-point conversion that were incompletions. None of them easy layup catches, but for a big 6'2" boundary type of target, you want to see him make a couple of those. The 2-pointer on the fade, you want to see him come down with that. The slant one-on-one, it looked like he got both of his hand, or at least one hand on that. You want to see him try to be able to haul one of those in. Not easy ones, but if they're 50-50 throws, you want to see somewhere closer to the 50-50 range. I thought Bennett Skowronek did what he was asked. A couple of big catches on third down, set up well to run after the catch. I thought both of those were really good play designs, especially the one on the 12-yarder for him on 3rd and 7 on the last drive. And then Kevin Austin, like we saw it. I mean, I think just even in the one catch over in the 20, I think it was 22 or 23 snaps, I think we saw that, this is Notre Dame's most talented wide receiver, and he was an inch away from scoring a touchdown. I thought that route was really impressive by him, where he has off coverage, still is able to shake the guy and get open, see the yards after catch ability. But overall, you're still not at a great spot with the receivers 4 games in and still trying to work things out when that time to do so is shrinking a little bit.
And let's face it, we can see where you especially miss Chase Claypool, because you talk about 50-50 balls. Those were 90-10 balls most of the time. And the catches he made last year consistently, I don't really recall a Notre Dame wide receiver so often just almost laid out horizontally when he's making so many of those catches that were jump balls. And you have that 40-inch vertical combined with that 6'4" height and the big body. Ian Book was able to just many times go to him. He was his get out of jail card in so many situations. And there's nobody there right now. And look, we're talking about somebody who could conceivably become the NFL Rookie of the Year this year, a second-round pick with the type of size and speed. You don't get that very often. And you kind of had that with Miles Boykin too, that combination of size, leaping ability, physical strength, and some underrated speed as well. So you're kind of back into 2017 when Notre Dame had these struggles with making those tough catches in traffic or those 50-50 balls where you didn't come out of it ahead as many times as you would have liked to.
Yeah, there's no one, like you said, on the current setup right now where it's like, yeah, we found that guy. I think you know who it can be. At least you're coming out of this game with that if anybody's going to be in that get out of jail Claypool-esque, even if you're not going to be Chase Claypool, that's not going to be realistic. I think you've at least identified who it is. So that's something. And like I said, I like the way that they used Kevin Austin and tried to get him involved. But yeah, right now you just still have too many instances where there's just not a lot of separation. When I watched the game back, in the red zone in particular, I think you saw that show up against a lot of the man coverage looks Louisville was doing. Book took 3 sacks back there. The last 2 in particular were, I think, coverage sacks where there was just nothing there. And even his touchdown run, I thought it was a good design because it basically cleared out half the field for him to scramble, but not a lot really to find. So running low on weeks all of a sudden to get that figured out to the point where it's at least a threat you have to respect. So we're going to take a break. We're going to come back, discuss a couple of interesting decisions that Notre Dame made, and a defensive performance that I think made everybody feel pretty reassured. Lou, let's talk about that fake field goal Notre Dame ran on 4th and 9, up 6-0, second quarter. Would have made it a 2-score game if Notre Dame decides to kick a field goal instead. Jay Bramlett doesn't pick up the 9 yards. He ended about 2 yards short, and Notre Dame ends up 0 for 3 at that point with red zone touchdowns. What did you think of that decision and that call?
You know, sometimes in basketball, we see what is called a frustration foul. You miss something on the offensive end, and on the defensive end, you create that frustration foul out of disgust of missing a shot and everything. I think that was a frustration call. They had been in the red zone a couple of times and came away with field goals. There's 43 seconds left, and the feeling is we need a touchdown to just feel really better about ourselves. But I think in those situations, a cooler head has to prevail where, look, if you get a field goal, now you're up 2 scores. Louisville maybe still feels good about itself going into the locker room because it probably should be 21-0 or easily could be. They ran only 5 plays in the first quarter for 12 yards, and Notre Dame had complete control. But 2 scores at that point going in, especially when you have to kick off to start the second half, that it's always easy to second guess, and I can understand the frustration aspect of it from the coaching staff of, let's try to get the touchdown, but you have to look at points on the scoreboard too.
I completely agree with you. It seemed like one of those stubborn calls, like, we're down here a third time. Damn it, we are scoring a touchdown. We're going up 13-0 at that point, where really I get the temptation and the frustration, like you said, but to be able to go up 2 scores into halftime, even after all the struggles, I think you would have felt fine with, especially considering what your defense was doing in that first half, and just kind of recognizing, points are going to be at a premium. And on the call itself, I mean, every coach will tell you whenever there's a successful fake or unsuccessful, if you ask about it, it's always we saw it on film. And I don't think they're just completely making it up. Like, I imagine there's something there, but for whatever reason, that's just a thing they default to. But I'm wondering, at least a little bit, what exactly they saw. Brian Kelly didn't get too much into it, just in the fact that 9 yards is a long way to go when the play is you got to get it blocked really well in about 5 spots and create a wide open cutback lane. And then they thought it'd be a touchdown, not just the 9-yard gain. So that would have been, I think, about 12 yards or so from where the line of scrimmage was, much less where the holder actually is. So I thought it was interesting there where, I mean, again, I don't know what kinds of late field goals they practice or anything, but something that it seems like
Patrick, that's a good point, what you brought about the 9 yards. If it's like 4th and 2, even 4th and 3 or something, you can envision it. But that's a long way to go when you have one knee on the ground,
right,
already. So that's another valid point about that.
Yeah, you kind of think like, all right, if you need the chunk yards on the fake, it seems a little easier to think, all right, maybe we just have to fool one guy who's on the receiver we're going to throw it to and just suck him in when he's thinking we're kicking, as opposed to we got to block it well and block it for a punter. I know he's a former high school quarterback, but it's not like you're blocking a stretch play for Kyron Williams or Chris Tyree. So I thought that was just kind of an interesting layer to it. Again, I don't know what they practice or what they saw on film, like every coach will tell you they do in that situation, but those were the kind of things that stood out to me. And really, it made you kind of have to make a decision that I thought was interesting, and another one I probably didn't agree with, which was going for 2 on the touchdown in the second half. You kicked a field goal you score a touchdown, like what happened, you're going up there. What would it be, 15-0 before you kick the extra point? You're already up to 2 touchdowns, so you don't have to go for 2 like they did. But even in the setup that actually unfolded, I thought it was maybe a little premature to go get that, go for 2. I mean, either way, like, they're still within a touchdown. Like, a touchdown can tie or win, and I get the point of, all right, touchdown, extra point ties it instead of wins it. But if you kick and or go for 2 and don't get it, you're still in the spot where Louisville can win, or at least take a lead with a touchdown or an extra point. And maybe I guess you can also kind of spin that around and say, well, if a no good kick, or a good kick, sorry, and a no good conversion puts them in the same spot, why not go for it? But yeah, I thought it was still a little just early in the game to be doing it. I thought the call and the execution was fine, just getting the fade to McKinley. Again, I really think that's one he could have caught. But yeah, I think that fake decision kind of set up the later call to go for 2 that you wouldn't have had to do if you were up 9-0 before you scored that touchdown.
Yeah, that's another aspect of it. On paper, it definitely looks like the right call. It's 12-7. Hey, let's go ahead. We're in the second half. Let's get for the 2. 14-7. If they score a touchdown, they have a decision to make of whether to try to put it into overtime or go for the win on the road. But and I've written about this many times. I like to keep that 2-pointer down to the fourth quarter more so, unless you're really, really far behind. But you kick the extra point at 13-7, you're still in the third quarter. There's a lot of football still to be played, although possessions were at a premium in this game. But what I'm saying there is, you take possession now at 13-7, now you're thinking, hey, we just get into field goal range into the fourth quarter. Now we're up 2 scores. That's 16-7, as opposed to at 12-7, and you miss. Now you kick a field goal 15-7. It's still a 1-possession game. So that's just me. I've seen it through the years many, many times where decisions like that come back and say, why didn't we just kick the extra point? Usually I even demarcate the last 10 minutes of the fourth quarter as that time to really start considering the 2-pointers.
Right, and what you just outlined there I think is another good description of it. Like, let's say Notre Dame stalled out a little bit on that final drive, and you had to kick a field goal. Yeah, 15-7, you still give them the chance of forcing overtime. Where instead, if you get the extra point there, that field goal on the last drive, even if you had to do it at some point, puts it a 2-score game with not a lot of time and not a lot of timeouts, I think, at that point left. So even though, yes, points or drives at a premium, I think it could have worked out where you had to kick on the last drive and you all but iced the game.
Yeah, it's not about second guessing. It's about, I view it as necessity. It's always easy to second guess. Well, it didn't work, so it was a bad call or something. Right. I just look at it from a necessity standpoint at 12-7.
Yeah, it's decision versus outcome.
It's more about that than the second guessing, because I hate second guessing myself. It's I don't want. It becomes almost cowardly at times, or too much armchair to do that, and I try to avoid it, and certainly try to stay in my lane when it comes to coaching decisions and all. But with 2-point conversions, I just try to look at it from a logical and necessity standpoint there. Right. On paper, it looks like the right decision. And, so many times coaches say, well, the chart says this is what you need to do. But it's sort of like analytics in baseball. Sometimes just go up and hit the damn ball. Yeah. You don't worry about bunting in this situation or that, or go for the steal. It's just sometimes it's the paralysis by analysis.
Yeah, and I'm with you there because I hate bunting, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, basically, I try to look at it as, all right, decision, good or bad versus outcome, good or bad. Obviously, that outcome bias can skew it, but at any rate, I think it was obviously didn't come back to bite them, but something that probably wasn't ultimately necessary, like you said. I'm just gonna take my L for even raising the question last week, where we'd find out, all right, was this defensive performance going to be indicative of a layoff or something that would be just a hard thing to guard and concerning thing going forward? I think we got a very, very clear answer there, Lou. And really, maybe I should have been call me a fool for doubting it, of what a Clark Lee defense would be able to bounce back and do. I mean, this was, I thought, one of its better performances in recent games, going back to, say, post Michigan game last year. Really did not allow much of anything as far as explosive plays. There were two exceptions, and I thought one of those, the big 29-yarder to Javian Hawkins, had set up the touchdown. Just a really good call. I thought that whole Louisville touchdown drive was good play calling, good coaching. We know Scott Satterfield can do both of those. And it was, a lot of what Notre Dame has done before and did early on, especially against Duke. Misdirection, play action. That play in particular was a play fake, bootleg one way, drew up all the linebackers. Javian Hawkins sneaks right behind, I believe it was Drew White and Shane Simon, wide open, just good call. The exception on the day, Tutu Atwell had a 28-yarder, just a coverage bust on a blitz that Louisville picked up well. But overall, did a really good job limiting big plays and getting off the field on a third down, with the exception of that one touchdown drive.
Yeah, 3 for 9 on third down. Notre Dame is second in the country right now in third down conversion percentage defense. It's something right around that 20 mark. It's amazing to me. Oklahoma State is number one, and that's in a conference where defense is often a rumor. So, but they've been exceptionally consistent with their third down play. You look at one of the things I was going to look at most was how can they contain Tutu Atwell? Well, 4 catches for 32 yards. 2 very good tackles by Tariq Bracy in the open field against him. They did not allow the yards after the catch.
Big deal.
There's really 2 big plays ahead. That wheel route that they ran with Hawkins right before the touchdown that he caught at the 1-yard line. And that pass also was a reflection of how strong the wind was, because he was wide open. And it seemed he was led pretty well, but he had to come back for the ball because a wind pocket kind of caught it, and he had to dive at it at the 1-yard line when it looked like it would be an easy score. But also Javian Hawkins. I mean, here's somebody who ran for 1,500 yards last year, ran for about 160 against a good Miami defense. They limited him. He had that 28-yard run right before halftime,
right,
when they were backed up. His other 14 carries were for 23 yards. That's excellent containment, and very seldom was he able to just even reach the first level, never mind the second level, because I thought the defensive pressure and just the way they plugged up everything was outstanding.
And I guess I'll take another L here. I at least kind of questioned the cliche of keep it simple, whatnot. I think it absolutely played out. And I asked Dalen Hayes this after the game of, like, what's the biggest difference that keeping it simple makes? And initially I wasn't particularly clear with it, but basically the gist of it is that you can just go play. And I think it was very clear that the plan was, we're better than you. Our defense is better than most anyone we're going to face, or that's what we think. So let's just go play like it and show it. And they weren't confused. There was a lot more decisiveness. You didn't see all of that much. There were a few instances of the uncertainty, passive, play fast, play aggressive and just kind of react to what you see. And it just looked really, I guess, free and easy. I mean, I talked about Dalen Hayes. I thought this was probably his best game. He had that one big tackle for loss. He really made the play, I think, on Kurt Heinish's TFL. I think it was in the first half. I don't remember. Let me look.
He held the edge
It was in the
tremendously.
second half. Yeah. Early second half. Hayes set the edge and forced Hawkins right back into Heinisch. Obviously, Owusu-Koramoah, I mean, I'm kind of running out of things to say about him at this point. Bracy, you touched on his tackling. Best defensive play of the day, Kyle Hamilton's pass breakup on Tutu Atwell.
Textbook. Just textbook.
Teaching tape.
There are just not many people at the college level, but even the professional level, who can play it as well as that. And that just shows the length, or that 6'4" length, the way he was able to rebound from the, looked like he was beat, but just get his hand out, the wingspan, not touching the defender to get an interference call. You can't draw it up much better than that, other than a pick six, which is hard to do in that situation.
I still feel okay about calling that as my bold prediction, and who knows, I might just do it every week until I'm right. But anyway, you just look at Hamilton out there, and I think this even shows up on TV too, and it's like he just looks so much taller and longer, and that's what that play was length, athleticism, discipline, just all on display. Can't say enough about that. And if there's one thing you want to nitpick or mention from the defense, yeah, I think it'd be no sacks or another game without a takeaway. Like, okay, those are things you want to see, and you're going to need it as these better offenses come up and on the schedule in November here. But also, I think worth highlighting that 4 games, Notre Dame's defense has had 4 performances with a 20% or higher havoc rate, and that's percentage of plays with a sack or TFL, pass breakup or interception, forced fumble or fumble recovery. And a lot of that was in the TFLs. They had 8. And like you mentioned, a big part of that going into that low Hawkins carry total outside of that yardage. And 20%, over 20% on a havoc rate, that'll put you in the top 10, 15 at worst in most seasons. So I think you have to like that, even if you haven't seen a ton of turnovers and whatnot, especially because this was another game where Louisville, with very few exceptions, didn't really try to challenge Notre Dame down the field.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things from Brian Kelly's press conference on Monday, though, at noon, he did mention, and I was a little surprised, where he talked with Clark Lee after the game about how do we get Isaiah Foskey involved more? How do we get Jack Kaiser involved more? I mean, Jack was in there, I think, only 2 plays. And look, he's coming back from the COVID protocols and all that. And
it looked like he was still finding his sea legs a little bit.
Exactly. And then you talked about the pass rush. Well, Foskey is one of the premier figures you want to see in there. And I think that's where it's like, okay, this is something we can get better at, maybe, is being able to get him involved a little bit more. Maybe that would enhance it. And it's still, the buck linebacker position is definitely a work that remains in progress, very much, trying to find a consistent element there. Whether it would be Jack Kaiser or Marist or Shane Simon. Simon had the most snaps, I think, at 24. Marist had 12, and then you had Jack with just 2 coming in, and seemed more so in a drop linebacker position, or kind of the rover type of position too.
Yeah, I think that it's all still a thing where guys are trying to find themselves, get up to speed. We know, because they told us they didn't play in the games, that all of those 3 guys had some time missed at some point for unavailability reasons. I'll just leave it at that. I think you can kind of get the point there. And that's still showing up. Again, something you want to have figured out right now. It's an important position here. But I think there was, on the 4th and 3 keeper on Louisville's 1 touchdown drive where Cunningham converted the first down, it looked like Simon had a chance to shoot past a blocker fill a gap and drop him there around the line of scrimmage. He looked a little hesitant and then got kind of blocked out and out of the play and created that running lane. Marist, I didn't notice a ton either way. He did a nice job playing the underneath defense on that Hamilton pass breakup. He initially dropped back and allowed Hamilton the freedom to break in that route and break up the pass. But anyway, still a position where you're still, not a lot of clarity there after 4 games where I'm not sure we're going to be at that point anytime soon. So one last thing here, Lou.
You also wondered, with the pass defense there at the linebacking position there, that's something that you look at Trevor Lawrence or company trying to exploit that.
Yeah, they'll throw to their tight ends. They'll throw to their running backs. And they'll throw in the flat, the screen game. Yeah, you want to be tightened up in that sense. So one last thing, and can I rant for a moment, where I've never seen in the span of, I think it was just a couple of drives or even the same drive, I think it was actually right after the attempted onside kick. No, one drive after that. No, it was on the onside kick. Great. I had no idea that rule about interfering with an onside receiver was there. Great job being able to see that, review it, diagnose it. Now that I know it's a rule, that looked like absolutely the right call. But then, immediately, 2 plays later, completely bungle something about, gave him the first down on an 8-yard gain where it wasn't close. The broadcast crew were confused. I'm looking at my play-by-play sheet here right now, and it's a mess of scribbles because I've just never seen such a weird, I don't know what the term for it would be, dichotomy or contrast or whatever, of really, really good example of officiating followed by bizarre blunder. I'm not sure who was hurt or helped more by that, awarding first down to start a drive on an 8-yard gain. It might have even been Louisville, honestly. But either way, just a weird thing. And that messed up the live stats feed, too. It crashed it. So, that was certainly an adventure. But just a bizarre sequence from the refs that you don't usually see. Maybe not a rant, but just a weird observation. So that's that. I just thought it was worth pointing out.
Well, you weren't born then, but 1990, Colorado was helped to the national championship by getting an extra down in a game against Missouri, where the officials didn't know what down it was, and they got an extra one out of it that proved to be important to win the game, and ultimately later the national title.
All right, there you go, ACC crew who ref that game. I can't remember the referee's name. At least you weren't the first. It won't be the worst instance of it. That'll do it for this edition of the Irish Huddle podcast. Please rate, review, subscribe to the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button and hit that subscribe button to follow us on YouTube for more content. You can follow us on Twitter at Patrick Engel _. That's ENGEL. You can follow Lou at BGI _ Lou Somogyi, SOMOGYI. Please leave us nice comments, rate us 5 stars if you enjoy the podcast. Tell your friends about it. We'll owe you forever. We'll talk to you again on Thursday. Preview this first road game of the year for Notre Dame, heading to Pittsburgh. Until then, take care.